Keith, we're broadcasting? Great. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here, and welcome to the Cabinet of the London Borough of Ealing. Just a few matters of housekeeping first. We continue to operate a series of precautionary measures to ensure that we are not communicating COVID virus. Therefore, we continue to ask all present to wear face masks unless exempt and unless speaking. We're going to go through the agenda shortly, but first we're going to take apologies for absence. I believe we have an apology for absence from Councillor Wall. There is one urgent matter, item number 22, lease extensions for the reasons set out in the agenda covering report. Are there any declarations of interest? None. There are matters to be considered in private on items number 14, 16, 18, 20 and 22. They contain information that we refer to as being on gold papers. If members intend on referring to those gold papers, please indicate before doing so. But of course, as always, if you do so, we would need to clear the gallery. Minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any issues arising from the minutes? If there are none, are they agreed? There are no appointments to subcommittees or outside bodies. So I'll move to the main agenda item. We are going to take London Street Space Plan first, given the considerable interest. What I'd say to both Cabinet, to the opposition, and to also members present, the way that we'll do this is first that the report will be introduced by the Cabinet member. After the report is introduced, I will call on members of the Cabinet to ask any questions that they may wish. I'll then call upon opposition parties to ask questions. And then I've received 4 requests to speak from members of the public, who will each speak for 3 minutes apiece. This is a meeting that is held in public. This is not a public meeting, and it is a provision of our constitution that we do allow members of the public to address Cabinet. After that is concluded, I'll invite members of the Cabinet to make any further additional points, and then we'll move to the vote. So on that basis, Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight's report updates Cabinet members on a number of our active travel measures that were funded under the London Streetspace programme, which was implemented during the pandemic. Based on assessment and monitoring of these schemes, along with consultation results, the report recommends that 6 temporary cycle schemes are made permanent. It further recommends the Fisher's Lane cycle scheme is made permanent and a cycle scheme for Gordon Road is implemented. The report also recommends a new cycle scheme for Boston Road, amongst other recommendations. It's further recommended that we build on our very successful School Streets programme by implementing 5 further school streets in the borough. The report recommends that 2 low traffic neighbourhoods, LTNs, are made permanent, namely Deans and Montague, LTN, and Adrian Avenue, LTN. A redesigned LTN at Hamilton Road will now go out to consultation. And it is further recommended that the remaining 7 LTNs are removed. There have been strong feelings on all sides in relation to LTNs, and the report aims to take a balanced approach to decision making, taking into account all of the data that we have. As an open, transparent and inclusive council, we have published all of that data on our website and in the report. I should draw Cabinet colleagues' attention to some supplementary documentation that has been included in the papers for tonight. We received a letter from Ealing Cycling Campaign, which asks us to particularly consider the new government guidance issued on the 30th of July, any impact on the funding we receive from Transport for London, the impact on Ealing cycling network, and consideration of walking and cycling data. The report does make clear that we have considered the new government guidance, and officers are confident that the 3 methods of consultation we have used, the commonplace platform, the statutory consultation, and the most recent CPZ-style consultation, taken together, offer a fair representation of residents' views. Officers are also confident that the traffic data included in the report is sufficient to make a decision. We are awaiting confirmation from TfL on our funding allocation for active travel measures for the remaining few months of this year. However, we've already started work using Section 106 funding, and we remain confident that TfL support our proposals for an extension to active travel schemes in the borough. The report includes reference to academic studies into the impact of LTNs on cycling and walking, and we have taken this into account. However, we have no Ealing-specific data of our own that we can rely on in this regard, and the report makes this clear. Ealing's cycling campaign also referred to the impact on Ealing's draft cycle network. It should be noted that these roads are all already 20-mile-per-hour roads to support cycling. LTNs are also just one of the tools in our active travel toolbox, and we are committed to improving the whole cycle network through further active travel measures and through developing a holistic active travel strategy. I further want to draw colleagues' attention to a letter we've received from Better Ealing Streets, which raises the filter on Culmington Road, which they would like to see retained. Officers have looked into this. There is already a 20-mile-per-hour zone on this road, and no collisions have been reported since this was implemented back in 2017. There is also a speed table 30 meters north of this crossing, and additionally, I can confirm that we will be reintroducing a pedestrian refuge which was taken out when the LTN was introduced. I also met with One Ealing this week, and they particularly raised their objections to the Deans and Montague LTN. Issues raised included the accuracy of air quality and traffic data. The report includes a full set of data for the previous much larger LTN 21, which Deans and Montague was part of. There are no concerns around air quality or traffic impact, given the new LTN is much smaller and will inevitably have much less of an impact. Nonetheless, I am happy to give a commitment that we will continue to review the data in relation to this LTN. Finally, could I draw Cabinet's attention to the independent report, which is included in the papers. As an open, transparent and inclusive council, we wanted to understand how we could better implement active travel schemes in the future. This is a warts and all report, which highlights some of the failings in terms of early engagement and consultation. Much of this was due to the way the government designed the funding and the impact of COVID. Nonetheless, we know we could have done better, and we are determined to learn from this experience. The report outlines recommendations for the future, which I believe we should agree. In particular, there is a recommendation that we agree an active travel charter outlining how we will do public engagement in the future, and that we will establish a citizens panel for active travel, which will be an inclusive panel. In conclusion, I believe the report attached takes a balanced approach to all of the data we have on a variety of schemes supporting active travel, and I commend the recommendations to Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Costigan. Questions from Cabinet? Councillor Nand.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Costigan, for that introduction and explaining in detail how the report was combined and the reasons of going forward with the report. Councillor Costigan, we know there are strong feelings about the LTN trials in Ealing, and I know you've mentioned in your introduction how we've engaged with a lot of groups, but I still like to ask the question, have we engaged with the campaign groups in detail?
Thank you, Councillor Anand. Yes, I can confirm from taking over the portfolio, myself and Councillor Blacker, who shares responsibility for active travel, along with the leader of the council, Councillor Mason, have had basically an open door policy to all of the groups that have been interested in active travel measures. We've met on numerous occasions now with Better Ealing Streets, with One Ealing. We also met with CamTag, Ealing Cycling Campaign, and we've had, email discussions with lots of residents as well. So not just campaign groups, also individual residents. Better Ealing Streets, we did a walkabout in the former LTN 21 to have a look at how things were down there now. And we also went to Fisher's Lane to meet a group of residents there who were supportive of the closure. Myself and Councillor Blacker went along to talk to them and have a look at the operation of that closure. So we have, as I say, had an open door policy really, and we've always been open to meeting all of the groups from having taken over this portfolio. Myself and Councillor Blacker have been willing to meet all of the different groups who are stakeholders in these measures.
Councillor Raza, followed by Councillor Nagpal.
Yeah, really pleased to hear about the consultation that you've been doing, but also the independent assessment that we've had in Ealing and our programme here. What was the biggest sort of learning that we've had from that, and what can we take away from that piece of work?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Councillor Costigan. It's very informative, and I'm really pleased to see more proposals for school streets coming forward. What's the process for these? Is it the school who asks for them to be installed?
If I take Councillor Nagpal's question first, on school streets, we have approached schools, in particular, we approached schools that were already involved in active travel measures and had school travel plans. And that's how we kind of started off the programme. So we, as a council, have actually been proactive and gone to schools and asked them to get involved in running a school streets programme. We have already made 10 school street schemes permanent in the borough, and they have been very successful, and there's very clear data to show the impact they are having on cycling and walking to school and also on safety. So they have been a huge success. I think some of the school streets, when we brought them in on a temporary basis originally to see if they would work, they were run by volunteers from the schools, and the volunteers would hold the barriers up every morning and every afternoon. Because we've now made these schemes permanent and brought in ANPR cameras that do that work instead, I think that has made the schools even more committed to these school streets, because they don't have the issue of trying to find volunteers. The cameras will now do that work for the schools. So we're very hopeful that we will have even more schools coming forward who are keen to take part in the school streets initiatives now that ANPR has been implemented. In terms of the question from Councillor Raza, and the independent report, I suppose the independent report has really kind of laid out the importance of public engagement. And it's something that I think that we agree that we need to focus on much more for the future. And we've been used to bringing in schemes like controlled parking zones and perhaps smaller interventions. Active travel is something that actually we have to bring people with us on active travel initiatives. It's about hearts and minds as much as anything else. And I think we have to learn how to do that work better. We have to actually include people in coming up with plans in the first place. I think we have said, since Councillor Mason has taken over as leader of the council, he's been very clear that we want to move to working with people where we no longer have that kind of old-fashioned patrician approach where we do things to people. And instead, we want to do things with people. And I think that's the biggest learning point of the report, that we really need to up our game on engagement with the public when it comes to active travel initiatives. There are also recommendations around looking at our transport strategy and making sure that's fit for purpose in the light of the climate emergency. But I think the key thing really is around public engagement.
Councillor Manro and Councillor Mahfouz in that order, and then we'll move to the opposition groups.
Thank you, Chair. We know there's particular interest in Fisher's Lane, and we've had a lot of correspondence both in favour of and against the closure. Could you set out what the data tells us on this particular scheme?
Yeah, I know Councillor Blacker is a very keen cyclist. I'm one of those cyclists who's very scared of cycling, and I think things like Fisher's Lane will help someone like me. But I'll perhaps let Councillor Blacker, who's also the king of data, respond to that one.
Thanks, Councillor Costigan. Yeah, so we've seen a 140% increase in cycling on Fisher's Lane, which is in the report. The thing to note, however, on that figure is it's actually likely to be an underestimate. Because of the way it's counted, the strips are on the road, so any cyclist using Fisher's Lane but using Acton Green Common rather than the road wouldn't be counted in that. And I think Councillor Costigan said we went down there to meet residents and saw exactly that. So it's likely to be an underestimate, that 140% increase.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Costigan, for presenting this detailed report this evening. One of the questions I think some people have been asking is that we were originally looking to make this decision back in the summer. We said that, and we were looking to take it in August. And so some people have said, well, why are we taking it this evening instead? And so I thought I would ask you if you could explain to us and everyone here actually the reasons why we've had to put it back till this evening.
Thanks, Councillor Mahfouz, for the question. Yes, we had intended to be able to make decisions on our active travel initiatives in the summer, and we were on track to do that. We gave people a final say on the low traffic neighbourhoods, and we were then going to look at making final decisions based on all of the data around mid-August. However, a week after our CPZ style consultations closed, on the 30th of July, the government released new statutory guidance on low traffic neighbourhoods. So at that point, we had to pause the decision-making process, and we had to look in detail at that new guidance from the government. I must say it was entirely unhelpful to have had that at that stage. I think it's the third set of guidance that the government has put out on low traffic neighbourhoods. And it certainly did feel that government was trying to put barriers in the way of local councils making decisions in their own areas. However, we have spent the last month or so having a look at that guidance and making sure that our decision making is robust and adheres to that guidance. And we're very clear, and it is outlined at various points in the report. And I outlined it also, I think, in my introduction, that we do comply with that new government guidance, notwithstanding the fact that it would have been far more helpful if we'd had it rather earlier in the day.
And so it seems a rather appropriate point to hand over to Councillor Stafford.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason and Councillor Costigan. There are quite a lot of items on this, but I will try to be as succinct as possible in my questioning. But just to start, can I say how delighted we as the Conservative group are that you have finally listened to residents and are going to remove 7 of the LTNs. And I think, let's be frank, it's down to the thousands of people who emailed, who filled out the commonplace survey, who responded to the consultation, who marched on the town hall. It's their victory that has forced you finally to listen to residents. And I very much hope that we are never in a situation again where a noisy lobby group pushes schemes upon this borough that are not supported by local residents. And let's be frank, We have known pretty much in the first few months, if not weeks, that these schemes did not work and that residents were against them, and they should have been removed much earlier. But I just want to ask three specific things on detail. First of all, the Deans Road and Montague Avenue. Why are you not taking any note of the boundary roads consultation? Yes, the inner area, if you want to call it that the people living in the area voted in favour, but the boundary roads voted significantly against, and as did the others. Not least because of where St Mark's School is, the ambulance station, and the fact that it's a pinch point at the Viaduct Junction for Ealing Hospital. And why also, if this decision is only being made tonight, did you sneak out a statutory consultation on the issue in mid to late August without any fanfare, without telling anyone as far as I can tell? And in fact, that statutory consultation closed before this paper was even published. Can I ask that you review that decision? Secondly, on Fisher's Lane, despite what the report says, there is overwhelming and significant opposition by local residents to the continued closure and the permanent closure of Fisher's Lane. You've said twice, I think, this evening that you wish to listen to local residents. But in this case, and perhaps even if you look at the Boston Road Cycle Scheme, you're ignoring the wishes of local residents. So for Fisher's Lane, can we have a CPZ style consultation so that we can finally get the true outcome of what people in the Southfield ward feel about the closure? And finally, on specifics, the Gordon Road proposal. I'm aware that the two residents' associations in the area, Serra and Grass, have written to you with some specific concerns about those proposals. Those don't appear to be reflected in the report. And would you be willing to defer your decision on those until you've made contact with the residents' associations who have those concerns and have spoken to them? And finally, I think we do need to talk about report Appendix A, which I have to say is one of the most damning reports about this council I think I've ever read in my many years as a councillor. And I think it is credit to you that you have published it. And yes, the report is clear that there was a significant failure in communication with residents. But I don't think that's all it says. I think it also says that there is significant failure in data. For example, the Labour administration, put an emphasis on rat running as a reason for introducing the LTNs, where the report quite clearly says there was absolutely no evidence of rat running in these areas. So how do we ensure that transport officers, or in fact any other department, in future, when making decisions and recommendations to Cabinet, make it based on evidence rather than on the small p political whims that department happens to have? And finally, the report is clear. Residents don't like being talked down to by people who assert they know best. So whilst I welcome your, I think you called it the travel strategy, can we make sure that we always do things in consultation with residents rather than, as it says, talking down to them? And finally, given all of that, I don't think I heard it this evening, will you apologise to the tens of thousands of residents who you put through this unnecessary trauma to get to this place today? Thank you.
Do you want to respond now, or do you want to wait for Councillor Malcolm? Yeah, Councillor Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a couple of questions on the LTNs. It was about time we saw the yes/no vote, and we welcomed that on what is a divisive issue. I think that is one of the best ways to deal with them. The Liberal Democrat group, as many residents in the room, many residents outside the room, will support the removal of those 7. My first question is, will they be removed from 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, as all 3 political parties on those 7 LTNs are in agreement of it, and it would be probably one of the best things that can happen to show that you actually are going to listen to people. That's my first question. The second question about LTNs relates to something I think you said earlier, Councillor Costigan, relating to the Deans Road and Montague LTN, you said you were going to monitor the data in the future as that comes forward. Can you just give an outline as to how that's going to happen and how residents will get sight of that data or councillors will get sight of it, so that there can be a change of action if that's needed, if certain things show there are problems developing? How do residents feed into that process rather than it just being in the town hall where no one has access to that information? In terms of Fisher's Lane, I can't agree to the approach that the administration are taking. I go back to a number of meetings that officers had, 2 or 3 different officers in the room at the same time, with the 3 ward councillors in Southfield. And a number of times there, we asked about consultations when the LTNs were being consulted on commonplace. Why was Fisher's Lane being ignored? And we were told in both of those meetings that a proper consultation would take place with residents associations, councillors, users, blue badge holders, residents, and cyclists and drivers, etc., of people in Southfield and the surrounding areas. And yet the outcome that you're suggesting should be followed now, the statutory outcome, is not really what people want to see. And as others have said, why will you not move to a yes/no vote? Because quite clearly, most of the people who either have a benefit or a negative live in and around Southfield, in that part of Ealing, and it makes sense to have that as an area to sort of hold a vote in that particular situation. It was also mentioned about this small increase in cycling. The number of cyclists are relatively small before, and it's not too much bigger now. What you've actually got is a huge displacement of traffic in those areas, with almost no one cycling additionally than before. So that's the actual facts of the case. And you've held a percentage up, but actually people need to see this, because there's actually an overstatement, not understatement, which I know was stated there, because that is the number of journeys. But actually one journey is sometimes that person will make 3 or 4 journeys going one way and then coming back. And my last sort of question is a statement about why Fisher's Lane was set up in the first place. It isn't what is reported here. I've got an email between Councillor Steed and Councillor Sabias, and I know he was there where you are before your time, and you're not him. But he stated very clearly, him and the officers brought in Fisher's Lane as a response to the dangers as a result of the displaced traffic from Turnham Green Terrace. And we know that's been reopened now, and therefore it makes sense just to hold your hands up and say, okay, we made a mistake. Let's not fudge the data. Let's not present 1 or 2 little stats. Let's just look at the data either fully or just reopen Fisher's Lane. That's what most residents want. 3 surveys, 1 from Hounslow Council and 2 commissioned by my party, have shown there is strong opposition to the Fisher's Lane scheme.
Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Councillor Stafford and Councillor Malcolm. I'll just go through some of the specific issues if I can pick up on. I think some of them I may have answered already, but I think Councillor Stafford was asking about the Deans and Montague LTN, and particularly about the boundary roads and people living on the boundary roads. And I guess, you know, how we have taken the decision based on the data and that there was opposition on the boundary roads to that LTN. So if you have a look at the report, it does explain in detail how we have looked at the data, and in particular for low traffic neighbourhoods, that there have been benefits and disbenefits to residents. Overall, the impact is actually much more focused on the area covered by the low traffic neighbourhood. So the data for the previous LTN 21 doesn't support any particular impact on air quality in boundary roads. And equally, we're not expecting that there will be any significant impact on the traffic on the boundary roads. So for that reason, we think that we need to give particular weight to the people who live in the low traffic neighbourhood, as I say, the benefits and disbenefits for people outside aren't actually significant in either direction that we can show with the data. It is actually the people within the LTN who will receive those benefits and disbenefits, and therefore we feel that we need to give additional weighting to their feeling, and a high proportion of those residents would like to have that low traffic neighbourhood kept in place. So both the collection of looking at the data and the responses has led to that particular decision. I think I've tried to keep a note of the points that you've made, but I think on Fisher's Lane, my notes seem to suggest it was a similar point to Councillor Malcolm. So I'll probably deal with both of them together. And I think it was you both saying, could we not just have a kind of a yes, no vote on whether people wanted Fisher's Lane or not? And could we do something like that? So Fisher's Lane is not a low traffic neighbourhood. It's a cycle scheme. And the report makes clear, I think, that they are two different things. They're all about active travel, but they are two different methods of achieving active travel. And as I explained with Deans and Montague, the low traffic neighbourhoods are quite focused on a discrete area. The cycle schemes that we're looking at are much broader in impact and in remit. And we are trying to deliver on both the Ealing cycle plan and also the London cycle network. That being the case, the impact is not just for the people who would live in the immediate area of Fisher's Lane. It is actually something that people across London will be able to use. And like I say, it connects up all of London. It does, of course, connect us with Hounslow, but even beyond that, it is part of a broader network throughout the whole of London. So in that context, that sort of a consultation of just people locally in that area, we didn't think was appropriate. However, we are doing a statutory consultation on Fisher's Lane. So if this decision is taken tonight, then we will be moving to a statutory consultation on Fisher's Lane. So there will still be the opportunity for residents and stakeholders to respond to the scheme and to make their views known. I think Councillor Stafford also asked about the Gordon Road cycle scheme, and in particular issues that were raised by the Residents Association, and I think Mr. French, who I think might be speaking later. So I won't go into that in too much detail, as I think Mr. French might cover some of those points. But the responses from both were taken into account by officers in putting together the final design of Gordon Road. There were some changes subsequent to the consultation. The most important issues on Gordon Road is the unacceptably high level of collisions on that road. So it is quite unsafe for cyclists at the moment. Residents were unhappy when we did do a consultation initially. They were unhappy around the turning onto Longbridge Road, and we have accepted that, and that is why we are looking at putting that in for 6 months and reviewing at the end of the 6 months and looking at that point whether it works or not. So we have very much taken that on board, and we would like to work with the Residents Association, the local councillors and others on making sure that we've got the right scheme, because I think it is a really important scheme. It will be, I hope, well used and offers a great cycle route for residents. I think Councillor Stafford made some points around officers that I'm not going to go into because they're not here to speak up for themselves, and I think it would be very unprofessional to make statements about people who can't stand up and speak for themselves in response. I think finally, just Councillor Stafford's point at the outset about listening to people, as I think I've made clear, we are an open, inclusive and transparent council, and it is very much our way of working to listen to residents, and that's why we have our independent report here tonight included on the agenda, and why we are going to focus on having an active travel charter and setting up a citizens panel on active travel, because we want to listen to residents and we know we need to win hearts and minds. But I do think it's rather rich. I wonder if he has checked his comments with his own political party, because, as I said, it is the current government who is continually changing the guidance, and I very much feel trying to stop local authorities making decisions that work in their local area. Instead, we have top-down pronouncements from people in number 10 telling us what we ought to be doing in Ealing. And I'm glad that this council has instead taken a balanced decision based on the local issues and our local area. Just to then finish, I think some of the other points that were raised by Councillor Malcolm. I think, Councillor Malcolm, you asked about the low traffic neighbourhoods. If we agree tonight to remove the 7 listed in the report, whether that would happen at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. The democracy rules of the council means that there is a call-in period. So the decisions that we make tonight can be called in by opposition councillors, which means it would delay the implementation. So, Councillor Malcolm, we are in your hands and in Councillor Stafford's hands. If you decide to call in tonight's report, then we would need to delay. At this point, if there is no call-in, then we would be able to implement the decision from, I think it's the 5th of October. We would turn off the cameras from once the decision was implemented. I think officers are here tonight, so if it's the 6th, then somebody shout, but I think it's the 5th. 6th, it is the 6th, sorry, excuse me. It's the 6th of October. So from the 6th of October, we will turn the cameras off if the decision is made tonight and if it is not called in. But as I say, if opposition councillors decide to call in the decision, then we would have to delay that. So we are in your hands, councillor. And I think that was pretty much all of the questions answered. Councillor Bracker, did you want to add anything else on the Fisher's Lane?
Before you do, Councillor Costigan, given the call-in period, I mean, I'll certainly invite Councillors Malcolm and Councillor Stafford to confirm whether or not they wish to waive the call-in and allow us to proceed with implementation subject to the decision today.
Can I just first of all go back to an answer that wasn't given, which I think.
Well, you can answer my question first.
I think you're the one who's here to answer questions, not myself. But
perfectly legitimate question, Councillor Malcolm. Are you going to delay the implementation of the recommendations if they're agreed this evening, or are you going to call them in?
I think there would be no controversy if you remove them straight away. Other local authorities have done exactly the same thing. They can do that.
Not unless you waive your rights. Councillor Stafford?
Sorry, subject to being able to split the report up so that we could potentially call in Fisher's Lane and the Deans and Montague, potentially, which is the issues that I've raised and have concerns about. We would be happy to waive our call-in rights on the specific recommendation that removes the 7 LTNs from a minute from now, if you like.
Councillor Blacker.
For all that, Chair, I was mainly going to say Councillor Costa, I think, covered it all. The only point was, I think that Councillor Stafford had missed the press release on the 16th of August, which gave him the news on Deans and Montague, which he clearly didn't read.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, at this point...
I did miss it, and so did
Stafford.
many residents.
Okay. So I'm just going to remind the public, I'm just going to... So this is a Councillor Stafford.
Point of order. Can I raise a point of order?
What's no? This isn't. There are no points of order in a cabinet meeting. Can I move now, please, to contributions from members of the public? I believe we have 4 speakers from the public. We will call them in turn. There are 3 minutes each for the members of the public. So I believe the first person is Richard Boucher. I apologise if I pronounced your name incorrectly. I'm sure you'll introduce yourself. Please do come forward.
Thank you. I'm talking on behalf of Better Ealing Streets. Better Ealing Streets believe and campaign for continually safer streets, the end of the dominance of the motor vehicle, and for the end of so many short journeys by motor vehicles in Ealing. We strongly believe the LGN networks work, achieving many of their objectives, and their removal is wrong. If you do the wrong thing, it flies in the face of your own limited published empirical evidence and data that LTNs work. LTNs reduce car journeys, LTNs increase walking, cycling, scooting. They reduce congestion on many other roads. LTNs do not increase bus journeys. If you do the wrong thing, it will fly in the face of your own climate change policies. Glossy adverts and videos promoting climate change emergency will be seen for what they are, just hollow greenwashing backed by no material action. If you do the wrong thing, it flies in the face of your own health policies. If you do the wrong thing, it flies in the face of your policies on safer streets. If you do the wrong thing, it flies in the face of the Equalities Act. You have not done any equality assessment on the LTN removals. How can the removal of the filter at Kilmington Road not have a large impact on the daily safety of hundreds of children and their family members? And yes, there have been collisions there, Councillor Costigan. How can the removal of 54 kilometres of active travel routes not have a negative impact on the most vulnerable members of society? If you do the wrong thing, you are putting at severe risk millions of pounds of active travel funding over the next few years. If you do the wrong thing based upon the disgraced consultation process, which your own independent report criticises, how can the decision be considered logical or legally robust? If you do the wrong thing, what is the next as far as active travel? The removal of 54 kilometres of active travel scheme and the introduction of school streets is not an acceptable political fig leaf. And how are you going to fund all this anyway, if you're going to lose the other? If you do the wrong thing, how can Labour be considered to be a progressive party looking after the interests of the most vulnerable members of society? If you do the wrong thing and there is an accident that would have been prevented by the LTNs, how will you deal with your consciences? The people of Better Ealing Streets urge our council, make the decision to retain the LTNs for the entire length of the temporary traffic order, and we can amend them, collect and publish the data relating to pollution, bus travel times, scoot and traffic data into the future, including through the end of furlough. This is including giving the officers the necessary instructions, manpower and financial resources to do so. Change your communications to promote climate change and tackle car journeys.
If you could wrap up.
I'm finishing. Do the right thing. Do what you say you believe in. Be principled politicians. Make the decision to retain the LTNs. Be on the right side of history. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you. Richard McDougall. Thank you. I've lived on Fisher's Lane for 14 years and have two children aged 10 and 8 who attend Belmont Primary School, which is next to Fisher's Lane. I've experienced firsthand the significant benefits that the closure of Fisher's Lane underpass has had and delivered to the local community in terms of increased safety, reduced pollution, and encouragement of walking and cycling as an alternative to car use. In addition, the Keep Fisher's Lane Calm campaign, which has contacted over 4,000 local residents in the last month or so, has received overwhelming support, with more than 71% of respondents in both Ealing and Hounslow supporting the closure. We believe previous polling was unfortunately influenced by the Turnham Green Terrace being simultaneously closed, and therefore does not reflect current opinion. There is strong local support to maintain the closure today. Fisher's Lane has never been fit for purpose through road. The underpass is only wide enough for one car, and the junction onto Chiswick High Road is inappropriate for regular traffic. It is no surprise that according to DFT data, it is the worst accident hotspot in the Chiswick area. Fisher's Lane also sees substantial pedestrian usage by families and elderly residents walking to and from Belmont Primary School, the playground next to the underpass, Rocks Lane Sports Hub, and the Commons, Home Cross House residential home, and the medical centre, all within minutes walk of Fisher's Lane. The closure of the underpass has made this area significantly safer, as mentioned repeatedly in resident emails to the councillors, and also referenced in an open letter by the head teacher of Belmont Primary School. There's also been a significant visible increase in walking and cycling activity to support the data presented. Traffic data demonstrates that there's been a dramatic decline in traffic in the area with little to no evidence of increased congestion on surrounding roads. It is hard to see how this cannot be seen as a very positive step towards council's aims of reducing car usage and pollution. Those seeking the reopening of Fisher's Lane often cite gridlock on South Parade as a reason to reopen. Traffic speed data, as well as photographic evidence, supports my personal experience that not only is it not true that South Parade is regularly gridlocked, the closure has actually improved congestion on South Parade. Other complaints refer to challenges in accessing the Chiswick Back Common area and or travelling north-south across the tube line by car. Given that Acton Lane and now Turnham Green Terrace again are both open to cars, the Fisher's Lane closure has a negligible impact on car journey times, even if living directly north of the underpass. At the same time, the ability to make these journeys by foot and bike have been significantly improved due to the creation of a safe cycle route through Fisher's Lane, again repeatedly referenced by residents to councillors. On every level, the benefits of this closure significantly outweigh the negatives, to the extent that the negatives actually even exist. The Fisher's Lane closure has successfully achieved all its intended aims, and I applaud the fact that the continued closure is recommended to the Cabinet. Maintaining the closure is supported by the data. I understand also, I'm nearly finished. I understand also by Hounslow Council and by the majority of local residents today, and I sincerely hope, therefore, that the right decision is made and the implementation is made permanent. Thank you.
Thank you. Will French.
Good evening. Now, if you don't know me, I cycle and use my bike for most local trips. I stick to residential streets, avoid heavy traffic on the Uxbridge Road. Now, this consultation document on changes to Gordon Road, where I live, says it aims to improve walking, cycling and bus services. Local Residents Association, Grass and Sierra spent a lot of time discussing them. We put our concerns and questions in a statement on 3rd of April, asking for a discussion with officers. I had a few comments from Colin Mackenzie, but no meeting, and the report tonight ignored us. Our key point was these proposals weren't designed with an eye to the big problems in the area. They may make them worse. Gordon Road plays an important role in the highway network. Drivers rat run down it to avoid the Lido Junction and Uxbridge Road. Problems have been accentuated by the turning bans on Longfield Avenue, which seem designed solely to suit the council's plans for Percival House. Traffic from here and Dickens Yard to and from the North Circular Road have to use Gordon Road. This is a total contrast with the spirit of the LTNs, which I want to say I largely agreed with, but it's the way they were selected, designed and implemented I felt disappointing. One LTN that might have worked is the closure of Longfield Avenue at the railway bridge, but it was never discussed. Now, turning to these proposals, they'll increase queuing at the Gordon Road, Carlton Road, and St Leonard's Road junction. Incredibly, the new priority in here will direct traffic north into St Leonard's Road. Those who know it know St Leonard's Road leads into a maze of residential streets. It's a crazy design. Removing the roundabout won't help pedestrians either, for whom this junction is unsafe. They need a proper crossing. Now, the turning ban from Springbridge Road will make the east end of Gordon Road effectively one way. It'll raise speeds and encourage eastbound traffic from West Ealing to avoid the Uxbridge Road. Westbound cyclists coming the other way will be endangered by the traffic, soon to include Percival House construction vehicles. Design of the Longfield Road crossing misses the chance of a much needed north-south safe cycle route through the town centre. It's an opportunity Percival House planners also overlooked. I don't know why. Now, whatever happens tonight, I'd like to request two things. First, I'd like the meeting to defer these plans for further discussions with local people. But if they do go ahead, I'd like, please, a request that the 6 months trial period really is observed and it's not overlooked like the Longfield Avenue one was. Finally, please, a word about Gordon Road pavements. They've been dug up
Will,
so often, they must be the worst in the borough. To really improve walking in the area, we need to improve those pavements. Many thanks.
Thank you. Lorna O'Driscoll.
I thank the Chair and Cabinet for allowing me to contribute to this evening's discussion. On the 22nd of July 2020, the first LTN was imposed on residents with late notice, no explanation or clear goal. This was rapidly followed by a further 8 LTNs during a global pandemic, lockdowns and extreme life adjustments. Residents were understandably left reeling by such a draconian, wide-ranging and negative additional burden to their daily lives. One Ealing was thus formed by the Union of Residents with one simple demand: to have our democratic voice heard. We never imagined it would take 1 year battle, 12,000 signatures on a petition, 2 marches, a High Court case, and 3 consultations for this to even be a possibility. These schemes were flawed from the outset. They were overly ambitious with no clear means of measuring success or failure and no baseline data. The mismanagement of them exacerbated these flaws and combined with the refusal to accept that the negative feedback regarding impact on everyday lives needed to be acted upon was a shameful episode in Ealing Council's history. We therefore welcome that the new leadership undertook to give residents the final say, and we're not surprised that this showed exactly the same as every other test of local public opinion. The vast majority did not want them to continue. We urge the Cabinet thus tonight to follow through and vote to remove the 7 LTNs recommended in the report for removal. We are, however, concerned that the Dean's Montague LTN vote was treated differently to others and is not justifiable. Our concerns are twofold. One, this sets a precedent for individual streets to vote for private roads, displacing their traffic and pollution to their neighbours. This scheme has no assessment of its potential impact on boundary roads. Lower Boston Road has already experienced very large traffic and pollution impacts because of LTN 21, with St. Mark's School the subject of unacceptable levels of pollution. And we know Vrinda Sharma, the MP for the area, supports this and has indeed written today to Ealing Council to act and ask them not to introduce this. We therefore urge the Council to also reconsider this scheme and change it from a permanent to a trial scheme with proper baseline data and monitoring being set from the start. Finally, we have heard a lot of emotive language regarding these schemes being ripped out and how the streets will no longer be safe for children, cyclists or pedestrians. Regarding safety, Sustrans identified traffic on these streets that were chosen for LTNs as having a low to a very low impact on cycling and recommending shared carriageway without dedicated infrastructure. This is borne out by the incredibly low pre-LTN accident occurrence within these areas, as measured by the government's own figures. Further, the idea that children cannot cycle or walk to school if the LTNs are removed is a nonsense, with 89.9% of school children already using active travel or public transport to commute to school pre-LTNs. These are not One Ealing figures, but TfLs for Ealing. If you vote tonight to implement the recommendations of the report with the amendments we have suggested, One Ealing will support that move. We will, however, not disband and will continue to ensure that the residents of Ealing are treated fairly and given a voice. The way forward is through cross-representation, diverse opinion and constructive engagement. That is the only way to design any scheme that will enable, that will able to garner support and achieve its aims. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it. Okay, thank you. Councillor Costigan, I'll give you an opportunity to respond, and then I'll open up to members of the Cabinet for any final remarks.
I'll just quickly pick up on a few points. I think quite a lot have been addressed already, but just in terms of Lorna's point and Deans and Montague, we did have, I met with One Ealing yesterday and we had an hour-long discussion about Deans and Montague, and I did go through that in detail. Deans and Montague is not LTN 21. It is a much smaller scheme. And we do not have concerns about the impact on the boundary road. The air pollution data does not show that there will be any particular impact on the boundary roads. Air pollution has gone down in the borough overall during COVID, and it has equally gone down in all of the LTN areas. So there are no particular concerns that there will be an impact on the boundary roads with Deans and Montague. But as I said in my opening remarks, we are very happy to commit to continuing to monitor the data around Deans and Montague, both the traffic and the air pollution, to make sure that we are right in that. But I believe we are. It is not LTN 21 either. It is a different scheme and it is much smaller. Richard from on Fisher's Lane, Richard McDougall, I just wanted to back up the point about Turnham Green. I think some of the points that were raised by Councillor Malcolm earlier and some of the issues that people have raised were related to the closure of Turnham Green Terrace and some of the initial teething problems with the scheme. And actually the impact has been significantly lessened since that closure was removed. Mr. French, just in terms of the points that you raised, as I say, we did receive many of these points during the consultation, and they were taken on board by councillors in coming up with the final scheme. Like I say, overall, the number of collisions in the area has been of significant concern to the council, so we really want to make it safer for cyclists. But on the band turning, we have already committed that we are going to review that in 6 months, and we absolutely will do that, I can assure you, because we do want to make sure it works. It is absolutely a priority for us to make sure that we have safe cycling schemes in the borough. Richard from Better Ealing Streets, you asked about, I think, equalities impact assessments. There is equalities data in the report, but also the equalities assessments are an ongoing process. We update them continually. And for example, when LTN 21 was removed as a result of the decision by Hounslow to close Swincombe Avenue, we did an equality impact assessment around that removal. So that's the approach we take. We continually update the equality impact assessments. I suppose just finally then, both I think Laura and One Ealing have said, you know, they want constructive engagement going forward. And I think that's very much what the recommendations in the independent report say. And we very much want to have involvement of all residents in our charter for active travel and in our citizens jury for active travel. And I think Richard has asked, you know, what's next? What are you going to do? And I think we very clearly set out in the report our continuing commitment to active travel, to school streets, to cycling schemes, to the full gamut of active travel measures that are in our toolbox. And we want to work with Better Ealing Streets, with One Ealing, with CamTag, with Ealing Cycling Campaign, with the Residents Association, and you know, anybody else who wants to work with us on making Ealing a safer place, a better place, a place where air pollution is not something that people can die of, because it's a disgrace that we live in a city where people die of air pollution. So we want to work with all of you going forward on that. And I hope that we can do that in good faith and take a positive approach to making Ealing a better borough.
So can I call on Councillor Donnelly?
Thank you, Chair. I'll make a few brief observations. I believe that the report has set in front of us, and with the various points that have been made around how we will review things moving forward, it is, if not the only way forward, certainly the right way forward in the situation in which we find ourselves. But just a couple of points in terms of what arose from the debate. And I was very, very disappointed to hear Councillor Stafford refer to noisy lobby groups. That's not what I saw this evening. It's not what I see in my email inbox. I see strongly held views of different kinds by my fellow residents, by my fellow citizens of Ealing. And if we can't this evening and moving forward, treat those views seriously and treat those views with the respect that they deserve, then we won't have the success that Councillor Costigan referred to and that Lorna committed to in her speech. You know, it's wrong to say that this is somehow a fabrication, a confection from the outside that doesn't represent the real views of a significant number of our residents. We know, because we conducted a consultation, that it doesn't represent a majority view amongst our residents, and we're taking action in accordance with that consultation. And if there's been a noisy pressure group in this whole exercise, it is perhaps the Department of Transport, and the enthusiast is Mr. Grant Chaps, who at various points we've had the urgency of implementation referred to in the independent report, for which we, as the independent report says, like most other boroughs, were caught on the hop in terms of the scale of the undertaking necessary. Then the DOT does a handbrake turn in November when it realises that there's popular discontent about aspects of this issue. And now, more recently, we see Mr. Chaps has talked in terms of opposing what he calls premature closure. Well, I think under Mr. Chaps's definition, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing tonight. We're doing what we're doing tonight because we're taking on board the views of the people of Ealing, and the reason that we're doing what we're doing is because we failed to achieve a consensual way forward of the kind that we need to progress the green agenda, the climate emergency, not just today, tomorrow, next week, next month, but in the years to come. And we will go back to the drawing board and we will find ways of engaging with the whole of the population of Ealing and moving forward together on these issues. And when we do, we will do it as one community and not as the result of pressure from any noisy lobby group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I just want to say, I think on behalf of Cabinet, and I'm sure many residents as well, I just want to thank Councillors Costigan, Blacker and yourself for the intense engagement that's happened over the past few months, and certainly the leadership that you've shown to make sure that the decision-making process on this whole thing that we're looking at this evening has been open, inclusive and transparent, and I think that's been really telling. Now, coming to the proposals that we have before us this evening, I want to start by saying that I would want to support the cycle schemes, not just because I'm a cyclist myself and obviously head out with my kids quite regularly on the bikes, but also the data that we have in the report shows that these schemes have actually improved cycling. And it's not just about these schemes standalone, but they are about connecting cycle routes, because of course that is incredibly important when it comes to cycle safety. We've also seen, of course, reports, TfL have commissioned reports which, with my portfolio point of view, looking at suggesting that walking, cycling, using public transport actually encourages people to spend, on average, 40% more in their local high streets and their local shops compared to those who drive. And so schemes like this are incredibly important to support and take forward, as we are looking to do so this evening. In addition to that, we have a really good set of proposals that we're looking to take enhance and improve and develop further in terms of school streets. And I think that's incredibly important. Again, as a parent and someone who cares passionately about road safety, and actually it's the reason I got into politics in the first place, we can see that these have made a significant improvement, and actually the enhancement that we're looking at in terms of moving to ANPR will continue to do that. We've heard this evening quite bizarre opposition from the Conservatives, who have said that we should be listening to local residents before we make the decision. And yet in the same breath this evening, we've heard them say that we should not be listening to the residents of Deans and Montague Road, because they are suggesting that there's opposition within the boundary road. But we've listened to you quite considerably, Councillor Stafford, this evening, and I've got the results here. We've been open, transparent, inclusive. We've shared the data, and using my GCSE maths, done the calculations in terms of if you included the residents and the boundary road results, if you aggregated them all together, you would still get a significant majority in favour of the proposals that we are looking to take this evening. So I'm not sure why Councillor Stafford cannot say straight away this evening that he will not be looking to call in that decision, but we'll leave that to him to decide. So to wrap up, Chair, I think it's a very fair and balanced approach that we've taken, very clear and transparent decision-making process that we've put into place and that we've engaged significantly with local residents. As I've already said, we've shown significant political leadership and looking to listen to local residents as we look to deliver a number of schemes that will improve active travel and road safety. We clearly made a commitment to continue to engage on this. This isn't the end of a conversation, or it's more the start of a conversation about how we continue to deliver active travel measures in the years to come. And so I will be supporting this balanced recommendation, recommendations made in this report.
Councillor Manro.
Can I thank Councillor Costigan and Councillor Blacker for your report? I'll make this a little bit personal. I mean, many people would know that I spent most of my working life selling petrol and diesel to the residents of Ealing. And during COVID, I mean, with not driving, I started to walk quite regularly. And earlier this year, I finally came to the conclusion that I would give up what was for 36 years a real pleasure, which was my car. I mean, many colleagues would know I've driven, shall we say, quite a large gas guzzling car for many, many years. And it has been a change. And I think this debate actually brings forward this issue around how do you change behavior? I hadn't used a bus for the best part of 30 years until recently, when I've been using buses more than 3 or 4 times a day, often to travel into Ealing, Greenford, and all the rest of it. And I think that's where this whole debate is. How do we talk and speak and consult with our residents about what's happening with our climate, and how do we change behavior in a way which we take people with us? We're transparent, we're open, and we talk to them about what the benefits are. I mean, as people know, I was quite large 2 years ago, and I've lost a lot of weight in that process by walking. And I think that, from a personal point of view, shows that change can happen, but it has to be done with people rather than against and for them. You can't force people to change their behavior, but if you work with them, consult with them, are open and transparent about the benefits that you get, health-wise, pollution-wise, you can actually make real significant change in our borough. And I think that's the difference. We want to work with the residents of Ealing to make that change, but people come to that realization in their own time. We need to work with them. And I think, Chair, this report actually outlines for how we would work in the future. I saw the independent report. I saw the issues that were raised around how implementation was done during the COVID period. And there were errors and there were mistakes, and need to be clear that there were some issues that we need to work with. But the reality is we are committed to being open and transparent and dealing with residents in a fair way, but we do need to move towards challenging people around climate change and making sure we put in active streets. There's a school streets going into my local primary school, and therefore there will be more of those hopefully throughout the borough, and there'll be other schemes coming forward, but each one will be consulted on, will talk to the residents properly and try and bring it in with consensus. And I think that's the important thing tonight that we are committed to. So I do support this report, and I think we should move forward on this. Thank you, Councillor Costigan, for your report.
Are there any more indications? So if there are no more indications, I'll direct Cabinet to the recommendations in the report, and I'd ask Cabinet, are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And I will say this as we move to the next item. The Council continues to be committed to active travel. There is no way forward in the 21st century where we face the challenge of the climate crisis with increasing temperatures, with worsening air quality, unless each and every one of us commit to doing our part to reduce emissions and to lower temperatures. And lowering temperatures doesn't just mean the environment out there in Ealing, but it also refers to the way in which we conduct our civic business. I do not doubt for 1 second that every person who is engaged in the issue of low traffic neighbourhoods and active travel hold genuine and heartfelt beliefs about the pride they feel in their local communities. And to echo Councillor Donnelly's remarks, we cannot allow ourselves to be in a situation where a discussion over the future of our borough can enter an environment as hostile as I think that we've experienced over the last 18 months and more. We do disagree. All of us disagree on many different things, but ultimately we have to come together in places and spaces like this to find the necessary compromises that we need to make to be able to live together in communities of harmony. The recommendations that we've just passed give you a clear indication about how we will move forward as a borough. And when we talk of open, transparent, and inclusive, what we're referring to is a conversation that we must have together as active citizens of this borough of Ealing. We are pledging to bring forward a charter on active travel, to work with residents, campaign groups, Better Ealing Streets, One Ealing, the people who are in the gallery today, to find a method and to find a way through this process, to ensure that we can bring forward cycle schemes, to ensure that we can bring forward school streets, to ensure that we can, yes, bring forward low traffic neighbourhoods that have the support of the communities for which they are constructed around. I hope that the opposition will heed the words earlier in this discussion and think very carefully before delaying this process any longer.
Well, on that point, Mr. Chairman, I didn't get clarification as to whether we can call in individual parts or not, and that would be very helpful to answer your question.
We will take this offline, but I would like to say thank you to those of you who have participated and spoken so passionately today. If you wish to stay for the remainder of the meeting, you are very welcome. We have a significant number of items. If you do wish to leave the gallery, we will take a short 2-minute adjournment, but thank you very much. Yeah, so short comfort break, but if you could return for 8:15. I think so. It's a matter for, I think the whips will probably want to have a conversation probably tomorrow. I mean, if you're looking to do call-ins, I'd just suggest that you do that offline, but we can pick up that conversation tomorrow. As a matter of interpretation of the council's constitution, and and we have our views, and I'm sure you do. Right, we shall resume. So we move to item number 7, Ealing's plan for good jobs towards an inclusive economy. Councillor Mahfouz.
To present to Cabinet our plan for good jobs, and I have a freshly printed out copy here, delighted to share. It sets out a vision that will deliver on our key priority to create good jobs in our borough and create a more inclusive and green economy as we emerge from the shadow of COVID. Why do we want to create good jobs? Well, because we want residents of our borough to be financially independent. We want everyone not to have to worry about feeding themselves or their children on a day-to-day basis, because everyone deserves a decent living income as a basic right. We know the past 18 months have been hard, and particularly hard and disproportionately hard on women, the Black and minority ethnic communities, those in certain parts of our borough, and those, of course, who worked at Heathrow or at many of the businesses dependent on the airport. Our employment rate is the second highest in West London. Southall had the highest furlough rate in the whole of West London and one of the highest in the country. Numbers of those needing support from the benefit system doubled to more than 20,000 people in our borough. And a study suggests that over 75,000 Heathrow Airport related jobs will be lost in West London. On top of that, the government is ploughing on with their ending of furlough at the end of this month, and they have already decided to slash universal credit payments by £20 a week. Both vindictive, unnecessary decisions that will have devastating impacts on our residents at this incredibly tough time. And so the case to have a plan for good jobs in Ealing is clear. And our plan focuses on four key areas of work and sets out an action plan in each of these areas to be delivered in these critical next 12 months. First of all, we want to focus on local people and in particular support our hardest hit residents. Secondly, we want to focus on a plan that invests in our most left behind towns and communities. Thirdly, we want to provide support to businesses and raise the bar on what good business and good jobs look like in our borough, using our spending power to encourage those businesses who deliver social value, treat their employees well, and recognise trade unions. We want this economic recovery to be a catalyst for a green recovery as we create jobs that deliver green infrastructure and move us closer to a circular economy. And of course, Chair, we can't do this alone, and we'll be working in close partnership with a whole plethora of organisations and, of course, the businesses that call our borough their home. And I wish to say in advance a huge thank you to all of them for the work that they do and will be doing with us to achieve these collective aims and goals. So in summary, Chair, this is a plan to lift those left behind out of poverty. This is a plan to reset our local economy in favour of tackling the climate crisis. This is our plan to deliver good jobs for our residents.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mahfouz. Councillor Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of the issues that have caused in COVID that I've seen in Acton and Ealing are the voids and closures to businesses, which have caused not just job losses, but many other problems. Now, with this plan, in the next 6 months, what will businesses see from the council? So they've got confidence that in a year or 2 years' time, things will have improved. And secondly, on page 40, it talks about the 1,000 volunteers that Ealing Together generated, which was a very successful sort of initiative at the time. But what are they doing now, just to make sure we've got an update on that particular aspect?
Chair, so what will businesses see? We've set out there in terms of the businesses that we have on board already that we're working with. So we're doing close work, obviously, with the High Street Task Force, who have already delivered a number of different initiatives within the borough, and I've attended a couple of their meetings, and we've got another one indeed on Friday, working as part of that with obviously Pithanger, High Street, but also the local bids. We're working with, and as I say, businesses across our borough to make sure that we are providing that support to them. There will be workshops that we'll be looking to deliver, for example, around how they can engage in procurement process, so that if they are looking to expand as businesses, they can do so from a position of strength and knowledge to do that. And so, as I say, we set out a number of different areas that businesses across our borough will see. And in terms of the volunteers, it was, as Councillor Mason, of course, was in charge of Ealing Together at the time, will know, we had a fantastic response rate from the volunteers. And actually what we want to do is to, we have a number of employability support programs that are in place to support those volunteers turn those experiences into well-paid jobs. I talked about actually at a very recent full council meeting a couple of those examples, and we'll be looking to continue to do that. But we do that, again, as I say, not alone. We do that in partnership, and actually, so colleagues may want to talk about some of the jobs partnerships that we have already started, and we will be looking to roll out across the borough to engage, as I say, in certain parts of our borough to support those who have been hardest hit and left behind.
Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. I want to echo Councillor Mahfouz's comments around creating and attracting good jobs to the borough. I think Ealing is an incredibly attractive borough for people to work in. And I think what we should do is try and encourage mixed use developments where we actually create job spaces and employment space. I mean, recently I've been working with 22 Uxbridge Road, which is a Premier Inn there, and we've attracted Sony TV, we've attracted Channel 4. The last England match, Ian Wright was in that building commenting on the football, and it's created 120 new jobs in that building, and I think there's 80 more to come. High-paying jobs, cultural quarter. So if that's the kind of jobs we want to bring in, high quality, well paid, and actually attract employers in. And I think COVID has shown us that many employers want to work locally rather than have their bases in central London. And so we can attract those offices and those jobs into Ealing so people can live, work, and actually manage their life in a smaller area, 15-minute city we talk about, where all the facilities they need are within walking distance and traveling distance and bike distance. And I think that is the importance of us working with employers and try to attract other employers to get good growth, good jobs, and therefore we all work together. And I think that can happen, and we should be really challenging people to deliver those for us. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Mahfouz, for the introduction. I think one of the interesting features of the plan is its recognition of the very varied nature of the borough and the way in which within our, I guess, our 7 historic towns plus Old Oak and Park Royal, which I might lay claim to as an East Acton councillor, but I realise that it straddles out into other boroughs. There are very different issues, very different issues of scale, types of employment that we were looking to have. But just focusing on North Acton and Old Oak and Park Royal, which I referred to, I mean, I would absolutely concur there's some very exciting possibilities here. For those of us who went to the formal opening of North Acton Square at the station a couple of weeks ago, it's seeing what that space can achieve as a community space, which perhaps hadn't previously been the case, but also being there, just seeing what's around, you know, and these tall buildings are not to everybody's taste, but it's actually exciting to see what that area has become and what it can go on to be. And I think in conjunction with Old Oak and Park Royal and the reference to the creative enterprise zone and the sort of creative hub that it talks about there, I think we can both move forward and reflect back to the heritage of North Acton with the creative industries, the BBC, and the other industries that flocked around it in its heyday. So it's like the once and future creative hub. And I'm really looking forward to the council playing a really important role in helping business to create those jobs. Thank you.
Councillor Raza.
I'm afraid Councillor Donnelly's pretty much said what I was going to say about the fact that I do like the idea that this is taking into account the different natures of our town centres and what their needs are. As a Greenford councillor, I'm hugely looking forward to welcoming thousands of square metres of employment space and the hundreds of jobs that will be created, because we've suffered a bit with the heavier industries moving out and really looking forward to getting some of the more creative industries coming into that space. So the report is very welcome in Greenford.
Councillor Nagpal.
Thanks, Chair. So I represent a ward in Southall where I've seen firsthand how much residents have struggled during COVID. And given Southall's been one of the hardest hit parts of London, and indeed the country, Councillor Mahfouz has already spoken about the high furlough rates in Southall, I mean, being one of the highest in the country. So I was really pleased to see the focus in the plan on area-based work, with the recently launched Southall Jobs Partnership setting the bar for our partnership work to ensure local residents are supported to get into decent jobs. So I support this plan wholeheartedly.
Any more contributions? Well, you know, I will say it's an incredibly impressive piece of work, and thank you both to Councillors Mahfouz and to officers who have brought this plan together. This is fundamentally one of the 3 core and principal priorities of this administration going forward, and reflects the fact that we have, yes, 7 towns and Old Oak that represent the 7 identities of our communities. And as we emerge from COVID, as we emerge from lockdown, we know that our working world will change. The future of our borough cannot be one in which we continue to have a huge income inequality between the western and eastern edges of our communities. Where in Southall Green, your average income will be £16,000, and in Southfields, your average income will be £40,000. We must make progress on ensuring that everybody in this borough has a decent living income. because we need to ensure that we are not simply sending people to rich jobs on rich bits of infrastructure like Crossrail to work in rich offices every morning. And we send, quite frankly, the poorest in our society on the 207 and the 94 to go and clean them. Yes, we are the queen of the suburbs, but we're also the breadbasket of London. We are the backbone of the nation's distribution network. We are the people power of Heathrow, and we are the crucible of creativity. And what this plan will seek to do is to strengthen this council's role in partnership with all of those who are creating and supporting jobs in this borough to ensure that people can have access to the good jobs that we know that they are going to need well into the future. So with that, I invite Cabinet members to review the recommendations in the report and agree. So we now move to a statement on Ocado Zoom. Councillor Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. So we want Ealing to be a great place to work, where good jobs come with decent pay and guaranteed employment rights, including having the right to have your trade union recognised. Unfortunately, Ocado Zoom in Acton, we seem to be seeing the worst of the gig economy and insecure work. Last week, along with the leader of the council, Peter Mason, we visited the site and met with some of Ocado Zoom's delivery drivers. During the pandemic, they have provided a vital groceries delivery service supporting the community. Their hard work has helped Ocado make a success of this new strand of the business. But they have not been treated fairly by Ocado. They are seeing agency workers brought in on lower pay and worse conditions, undercutting their earnings. They're being pressured to sign up for new contracts that would leave them thousands of pounds worse off each year. They've invested in electric vehicles at their own expense on the basis they would be recompensed for this through more orders, yet the new contracts are silent on this. Ocado has refused to recognise the delivery drivers union or to engage with the workers. Peter and I wrote to Ocado to ask them to encourage and change their approach, treat their employees fairly and recognise their union. Unfortunately, their response hasn't addressed the key issues around pay, the new contracts, drivers' investment in electric vehicles, and there is complete silence on recognising the trade union representing this key group of staff. Ealing has thousands of good employers who treat their workforce fairly, and Ocado Zoom needs to step up and join them, rewarding the drivers whose hard work has made their success possible, and meet with their representatives as a matter of urgency.
Thank you, Councillor Mahfouz. All through education at Berrymead Infant School and Berrymead Junior School, Councillor Nagpal.
Thank you, Chair. So this report seeks approval to commence the first stage consultation on whether to amalgamate Berrymead Infant and Junior Schools into a primary school. There are a number of infant and junior schools remaining in Ealing that split the primary phase for infants at age 4 to 7 and juniors at age 7 to 11. But most primary phase education in Ealing is in primary schools where children remain in the same school from age 4 to 11. So the council has no directive policy on amalgamation of infant and junior schools into primary schools. However, it does have a preference for primary schools and asks governing bodies to consider amalgamation because it helps with the transition through the years for the students. There's also an increasing financial pressure on smaller schools, and the number of pupils at both of these schools has declined in recent years. The head teacher of Berrymead Junior School is now executive head to both schools, and both governing bodies have indicated that they would like to consult on whether to amalgamate as a primary school. The amalgamation would involve the technical closure of one school and extension of the age range at the other. There's 5 stages for closing a maintained school, and stage 1 is the consultation. So if Cabinet approves moving to the initial consultation, the views of the wider school community will be sought by way of a consultation process, and the consultation will also cover which school would extend its age range and which school would close. And further reports to Cabinet will be required before a final decision is made.
Unless there are any contributions, we'll move to the recommendations. There's 3 set out on the cover page of the report. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
2021-2022 budget update, Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Given the time being later than usual, I won't read out what members will doubtless have already read. It's available to the public, but this is the regular update on how we're doing within this financial year. Overall, we're operating to within £386,000 of the budget that we set ourselves, represents 0.15% variation, which is good news. Obviously, within that, it always hides a multitude of toing and froing within individual budgets. We're still seeing pressures, particularly within children's services, within adult social care, and also within areas of place. Make reference to the fact that our COVID responsibilities within currently 1.2 currently being met. I mean, I think I should caveat that by saying, in terms of moving forward, we're not sure how many responsibilities in future years we're going to end up holding on to, but without the funding in the short term that's come to support them in 21-22. Like many other things, these questions remain unanswered because the government has yet to provide any meaningful information about the financial settlement ahead. But I'm happy to take any questions.
And you've done it again. You've provided a helpful segue for Councillor Stafford to make his contribution.
Thank you very much, Leader, Councillor Donnelly. Just one very brief question on 4.3.5, which is about budget pressures in the Place Department. In that section, the subparagraph A, it says the Place delivery net pressure of 1.139 million is mainly driven by existing GEL contract costs. This is the new waste and recycling service that was brought in barely a year ago. Can you explain to me how a service that is barely a year old is managing to create pressures of over £1 million, especially when those pressures appear, according to the report, to be coming from existing contracts rather than any unforeseen additional problems or pressures? Who is managing the finances of GEL, and what are they doing to get it back into the black?
Thank you for the question. Of the £843,000 referred to, almost half relates to, as far as we can identify, either increases in the contract specification services level or price increases. That obviously means around half doesn't relate to those, and we're in the process of conducting an in-year review, but Councillor Costigan may be able to indicate more detail on that.
I think, yeah, Councillor Donnelly has set out the situation in relation to the budgeting of Greener Ealing, which, as you say, Councillor Stafford, we did bring in-house. We ended the contract we had with the previous contractor. We brought it in-house. And as a result of that, we have seen our performance figures much improved on the previous contracts. And we are actually now ensuring that we pay the London Living Wage to all of our staff, and we are contributing to a proper pension for all of our staff as well. All of that means that we have a high morale in the staff group in Greener Ealing. They're doing a better job. We're picking up the rubbish. Our missed collections have gone way down compared to what they used to be. However, we do face some pressures, and one in particular I just wanted to raise, just to show you. You can have all the budgeting in the world and then things happen that are unexpected. Perhaps we should have expected this. People will have read about the situation with HGV drivers, and that is actually impacting on Greener Ealing. I think many of us would say that you might have seen that there could have been issues like that as a result of Brexit. It does seem to have been one of the side effects of Brexit, that people who had previously done those jobs went home. And we are now finding throughout the country, there is a lack of HGV drivers to pick up the rubbish. Some boroughs are finding they have to cancel collections due to the lack of HGV drivers. And I'm sorry to say that there has been so far absolutely no action from government on trying to alleviate this issue. And I think many councils are now finding they're having to increase the rate of pay to try and overcome this. We've got private sector companies literally poaching drivers in their cabs while they're having their lunch break. I raised this issue myself. I wrote to the Secretary of State for Transport, Grant Shapps, back in August, and I asked him to consider adding HGV drivers to the shortage occupation list, and also to take action on the huge waiting list for people who want to train to be HGV drivers, so we could grow our own. To do the HGV drivers test. And I'm afraid to date, I've had no response from Mr. Shapps. I look forward to one, but it would be really helpful for us and would assist in our budgeting in Greener Ealing if we didn't have to put up with issues like that, that government could easily address if they stepped in and took action.
And just to round, thank you, Councillor Costello. Just to round up, we're not underestimating the challenges that we face around the contract. We're in the more fortunate position that because it is now ours to run, we no longer have to choose between determining a price and accepting a level of service, or determining a level of service and accepting a price, which is the kind of situation that we were in the outsourced era.
Councillor Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I had two additional questions to the one just raised there. It relates to paragraphs 4.3.3, paragraphs B and C. So in paragraph B, it talks about the delay in implementing a number of savings in a number of areas. What are you doing specifically to improve this situation? And secondly, with the high turnover that's referred to in the subsequent paragraph, can you give more details of the international recruitment programme, and does Brexit have an effect on this or not?
Well, I think Councillor Blacker may be in a position to update you on the details of the international situation. I mean, clearly, we were in receipt last week of what was described as a plan for social care. I don't know whether Councillor Malcolm shares my view that it was in fact nothing of the kind. But in the interim, we're having to get on with it. And the kind of pressures that are laid out there, the kind of difficulties we have around recruitment, and some of the problems post-COVID, not post-Brexit in this case, although perhaps it's a mixture of the two. We're going to have to deal with, but Councillor Blacker, I think, has some more detail.
Thanks, Councillor Donnelly, and I'd echo your comments about the lack of a plan, and you know, it's a view shared across the aisle. I think the Honourable Alexander Stafford, formerly of this parish, was saying that what we needed was a properly funded care for social plan, not raising taxes willy-nilly, which is what we appear to have got. You know, we're not currently seeing any particular staffing challenges in the sector within Ealing, any concerns reported. But what we are doing, of course, is investing in setting up the Ealing Care Co-op, which will improve conditions and tie into the kind of the good jobs that we've been talking about this evening. So we're making interventions in the market to support it better. You know, it's going to be a very difficult winter. I think we're going to have the double whammy of COVID, and we're going to have the double whammy of flu season that we've not had for a couple of years as well. And as you say, you know, the non-plan that was announced is going to do nothing to do it to solve those challenges. And I think, you know, that is quite clear. And the pressures that we already face through the demographics and rising costs, the government are very clear that are not to be met by the rise in national insurance, and will have to be met through our existing budgets. So thank you very much to the government once again.
And as I sort of direct us to the recommendations on the international recruitment campaign, I will say this, the fact that we have to run international recruitment campaigns for social workers in our children's teams is an indication of the challenge that we have. We have a cost of living crisis in which people cannot afford to live in London, and a constrained public service that across the board is financially constrained in our ability to be able to attract people to be able to do those roles in London. Now, that is a challenge right across the board. And as a consequence of Brexit and the removal of the ability of people to move within Europe, we have to look further afield. One of the great things, though, in respect of international recruitment is that we, of course, are able to recruit from a very diverse pool of people who bring very incredibly good skills and experience. And I'm sure in the coming weeks and months ahead, and we will see the fruits of that labour. So on the basis of that, unless there are any more points or comments people wish to make, Councillor Donnelly, we'll move to the recommendations in the report 1 through 1.9. Are they agreed? Thank you very much. Draft tenancy strategy, Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. This item has been brought in because the Localism Act 2011 asked local authorities to set the strategy for registered providers in our area around their tenancy arrangements. There are other organizations that also give them guidance. They have the Regulator of Social Housing, the GLA. Many RPs are quite large, so they tend to cover more than one local authority, so they have their policies set. But the strategy actually looks at how tenancies are granted, the circumstances which social landlords can grant tenancies, where they can have succession rights, etc. So this policy, the strategy is looking at giving guidance to them. Not all of them will follow it, it's only guidance. But the reason this guidance is now there is that there has been a change since the previous one. And the issue was that in 2016, the Conservative government wanted to move people towards fixed term tenancies, which caused a lot of issues about tenants feeling vulnerable, 5-year ones, and therefore it caused a lot of issues. They did recognize their mistake and change their minds. And in 2018, they let us go back to lifetime tenancies. So many registered providers are now moving towards lifetime tenancies back again. And therefore this is just indicating the change. There's not much change, but there is a change towards moving towards lifetime tenancies. Thank you.
Councillor Stafford.
Thank you very much, Leader. Just two questions. My reading of it is that you only received 25 responses to the consultation. Do you believe that the council is doing enough to seek out the genuine views of the residents as part of this consultation? And are there any other options for future consultations to make sure we get a higher response rate? The second question is very much a practical one, so it might be for the officer to answer. But just in terms of the lifetime tenancies for adults with disabled children, can you clarify that if a disabled child leaves the family home for whatever reason, perhaps goes into another type of accommodation, that the tenancy will not be affected? In other words, that does the tenancy stay with the parents, or does it go with the disabled child?
If I go to the officer for the specialist one, then I'll come back.
I understand that the tenancy would stay with the parents, but I think I probably want to get you some clarification on that, if that's okay, Councillor Stafford, to 100% confirm. But that's my understanding.
In terms of the consultation, this is quite a specialist strategy. It's not something that many people would comment on, but it is only guidance. We can't even force our registered providers to follow it, but it is something that we have to carry out under the Localism Act 2011. So I'm not aware of what issues, but I will come back to him in terms of checking out in how our consultation strategy is working. But there are many of these consultations where we get a less than adequate response.
Thank you. And I would say sort of the greatest consultation there ever is, of course, is in an election in which the Labour Party certainly included within its manifesto a commitment to lifetime tenure, both for council properties, but also seeking to achieve that from all of our registered providers. And wouldn't it be great also if we could get some reform of assured short hold tenancies to give tenants in the private rented sector some greater degree of security of tenure in their properties. That's a substantial consultation, and I think we had an awful lot of people agree with our view on that. So with that in mind, can we move to the recommendations of the report? 1, 2, 3, are they agreed? Thank you. We are moving to extension of domestic gas servicing and installation contract. Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite straightforward. It requires us to approve the extension of the gas servicing contract because it's 2.2 million. It needs to come to Cabinet. A new procurement will begin to establish a framework. And then the current gas service contract, Tree Brown, was extended until October 2021 through an earlier Cabinet decision. The report requests a further extension of 6 months until March 2022 to enable the procurement of the new framework to be completed. That's very straightforward.
Very, very straightforward to the extent, and I do thank the opposition for agreeing to postpone our constitutional review group, which is considering constitutional amendments that would, of course, have enabled this paper to have been taken by an individual Cabinet member decision. And we would have reclaimed a good 3 minutes of our time this evening, but we'll move to the next agenda item. Oh, we need to agree it. Is it agreed? Is it agreed? Agreed. Moving to the Highways Transport Framework Contract, Councillor Costigan.
Thank you, Chair. This, I think, should be a fairly straightforward contract, so I won't keep people too long. It's a call-off contract in the main, which basically means that if we get funding to do something, then we're able to do it in a speedy manner. We already have the contract in place. It is a kind of a follow-on from a previous contract. We would have recontracted about a year ago, but because of COVID, we didn't. So it's very similar to the previous contract. There is a slight saving in the contract that we do invest in the contract. But basically, I don't think it's very contentious. It allows us to do the work that we need to do, including bridge works and inspecting of the roads. And I recommend that it is agreed.
Councillor Stafford.
Thank you very much. A very brief question. 3.2.2, which is Lot 2 condition surveys. Can I just confirm that I understand that this is the specific for the annual determination of the prioritization of roads and footpaths, but can I just confirm that that will mean that there is no change to the ongoing inspection of pavements that happens, depending on what pavement it is, much more regularly?
No, there's no change. And this is based on the previous contract.
Okay, and to return to a previous theme of constitutional review group, here is an indication of something that even under delegated authority of individual Cabinet member decisions would still have to come to Cabinet anyway, so to give people assurance. Are the recommendations in the report agreed? Yes, thank you very much. Housing delivery update, Golf Links Estate Phase 3 demolition, contract procurement and update. Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. This report covers 2 issues. One is the procurement of a demolition contractor for the Golf Links Phase 3 development. And it also looks at delivery of affordable housing. We've got a target of 2,500 generally affordable homes by 2022. And this report indicates that we've reached 85% of our target so far, and hopefully we'll reach the full amount, 100% and above, if we can, by 2022. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Stafford.
Thank you very much. Just once again, a quick question. Paragraph 3.10, where it states that the council is unlikely to meet its target of delivering the 1,362 generally affordable homes. The explanation given for this is that the council was starting from a smaller base, which, unlike the RP delivery, who have much more mature programs in place, Surely this was something the council knew at the outset. So why does it now come as a surprise that the council starting from a smaller base? Is this the genuine reason, or is it to do with other failings?
Thank you, Chair. Broadway Living had started off with a very small base. We had ambitious plans in place, but the issue is around procuring land and procuring the ability to move forward. There have been a number of issues around contracts, etc. As you may be aware, that building industries and COVID has gone through a really difficult time in terms of managing that build program. Therefore, there have been some delays, but we are moving forward as fast as we can. But our registered providers have a much more mature program in place, and therefore they have produced the majority of our generally affordable homes. And we've, through the planning system, tried to get the maximum number possible through that process, but we will get to our target, and our target is 2,500. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, to echo your point, Councillor Manro, I mean, unless Councillor Stafford sort of been missing in action as he has been for the last 2 cabinet meetings, it's great to have him here contributing as he has been, but we've just been through a pandemic and aren't quite out of it yet. We're also coming out of the consequence of Brexit, in which we've already been warned by the business secretary that we're in for a winter of discontent because supplies aren't going to arrive on these shores. So it's no great consequence that the building industry is facing the compound challenge of increased build costs, the lack of labour, and the challenges that this local authority has faced being able to service all the things that we've had to do during COVID. What this report says is actually the housing market in Ealing, in terms of its delivery, is resilient. We are at 85% now, and we're on targets to meet that goal by the end of this administration. So I think that should be commended, both in terms of our register providers and also the continued work that Broadway Living and our wider estate regeneration team do to ensure that we're hitting those targets. So with that, and pointing to the recommendations in the report, are we agreed? Let's move now to ICT Property Services Fleet Electric Vehicles. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, the Council runs quite a significant number of vehicles in its different services. This paper refers only to the vehicles run by the ICT and Property Services team. Up to this point, ICT and Property Services have run a fleet of a mix of petrol and diesel vehicles, which have been obtained on a leased basis. The recommendation is to replace those by the purchase of electric vehicles to the number of 23. We believe that this apart from the climate impact, which is clearly beneficial, we believe this is the most effective way to do this financially. And we would hope in due course to see those other parts of the council that run vehicles follow down the same path.
Watch this space. Are the recommendations in the report agreed? Moving to older adult accommodation strategic brief, Councillor Blacker.
Thank you, Chair. So this brings the housing department team in with the adults team to propose 581 mixed tenure homes across 3 sites. And essentially looks to implement genuinely affordable, high quality homes for people to live in longer and therefore healthier lives. It will move forward with the proposals at Lexton in the immediate term and start consultation on 2 further sites to finish the strategy.
Councillor Manro.
Yeah, so Chair, can I say, I really welcome this in terms of we are actually providing specialist homes for our elderly residents as well as mixed use. There will be family accommodation. So we'll have a mixed community in some of these sites, and it will actually deliver the kind of homes people want to live in. And it's bringing forward really high quality specialist homes for our elderly residents. And therefore, that's how a housing market should be worked on to actually deliver what people need at the right time. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to particularly commend officers who've sort of risen to many of the improvements in the report that we've seen around the work to really support our residents, some of the most vulnerable residents, who are our tenants, to ensure that they're properly supported through the process of what, of course, will be difficult in the first period, but ultimately we'll be able to move to incredibly high quality, purpose-built accommodation that reflects the needs of older adults in the 21st century. So with that, could I ask Cabinet to note the recommendations and to agree? Okay, the provision of temporary accommodation at Western Avenue, Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. The council has been approached by QED Developments Limited in respect of a site on the Western Avenue, which they have an option on. The council also owns some land next to it. They've asked us to, in principle, agree for us to move that land across to them and get a fair consideration in terms of the value of that land. And in return, they would provide us 44 new built homes, and the council would agree to lease them for 15 years. This is an in-principle decision, so approval is sought in principle to continue engagement with QED Developments, including the preparation of a detailed business plan and options appraisal. And in the event that the plan and options appraisal support proceeding, authority to proceed is delegated to the portfolio holder for generally affordable homes. So this is just an in-principle decision to move forward in negotiations with them to provide 44 new homes for our temporary accommodation. Thank you, Chair.
Could draw Cabinet's, unless there are any comments, if could draw Cabinet's attention to the recommendations in the report, 1 through 6, are they agreed? Tender for leasehold property insurance, Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. The council is required to insure HRA leasehold stock. So therefore, the value of the partnership is over 1 million a year, which means, again, under the Cabinet rules, Cabinet approval is required. So the current building insurance contract will expire on the 31st of March 2022, and therefore we were advised that the company will be ceasing operations in the UK and will end the existing contract in March 22. A new contract must be tendered and awarded to commence on the 1st of April 2022. So therefore, this report is required.
Councillor Donnelly.
Chair, just to declare I'm a leaseholder and therefore won't take any part, I think, in this decision.
Again, makes the CRG point in the future, there's no indications to speak on this. Not that I am ever tired of hearing the dulcet tones of Councillor Manro, but we could have, of course, skipped this by taking this by an individual Cabinet member decision, as we probably will in the future, if those constitutional amendments are agreed. Are we agreed with the recommendations in the report? Oh, no, don't worry. You didn't agree. Right, you declared, don't worry. West London Alliance, SIP, 1 high-speed fibre, I can't say it now, high-speed fibre funding delivery. That's a tongue twister.
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, West London Alliance was successful in obtaining £2 million worth of funding, so the bulk of the recommendations relate to the legal consequences of that, and particularly Ealing's role as the accountable body for this investment. But we also need to tidy up an issue relating to an earlier successful bid from 2018, because we want to be able to procure via the Crown Commercial Services Gigabyte dynamic purchasing system, which didn't exist at the time of the 2018 decision, and therefore we just need to tidy up by getting permission for both of these pieces of money working together to make the best via, if applicable, this particular purchasing system.
I don't see anybody indicating, so I will draw your attention to recommendations 1 through 5 on page 2. Are they agreed? Lease extensions, modular housing, Councillor Manro.
Thank you, Chair. The council currently leases 3 sites which host temporary accommodation units for families in need of housing in the borough. They're Marston Court, Westwall Lodge and Meath Court. The council believes that it's the right time to consider options for extending the existing leases on these sites. This does not mean that it's our intention to continue utilizing these sites. Rather than in secure extensions, the council will benefit from the flexibility to either discontinue use of the sites as planned or continue their use beyond the current end dates. Any decision to actually extend the use of the sites for current purpose would be subject to a further decision by members. It is delegated to the portfolio holder for generally affordable homes to agree the lease extensions, but we would have break clauses in them if that was the decision that we took. Thank you.
Councillor Stafford.
Thank you very much. And notwithstanding what Councillor Munro has just said, if the council is required to extend the lease or to utilise the site, sorry, by up to 10 years, does the council intend and believe that the current modular units on that site will still be appropriate and viable over that 10-year period, or will they be looking to build or refresh or renew the modular units on that site? And allied to that, have we received or how are we seeking feedback from residents, tenants in those modular units as to issues of maintenance, heating, security, etc. And what are we learning for that if we are going to refresh those modular sites?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Stafford. What I would say is that these sites do help us in terms of, temporary accommodation, and families would need to go into bed and breakfast if we didn't have this. There is a real problem with temporary accommodation in the borough. I think we have 2,500 families. If I'm right, I may be wrong, but that's the kind of figure I've heard, that we would need that kind of accommodation. Obviously, you're aware of the £20 a cut in terms of taking back the universal credit. So many families may end up homeless as a result of the government's move to cut universal credit. These sites, whilst not ideal, are something that we need to look at and see. We do need to refresh them. There are some sites that wouldn't necessarily be the best way, but the other option is bed and breakfast, which again, when we talk to families, they value the idea, the actual having a front door, having a place that's private to them that they can live in. So therefore, it does enable us to, I won't refer to the gold papers, but it does enable us to access resources from government by maybe looking at extension of leases. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would say, look, we all have inboxes, and anybody who's held the housing brief knows the type of emails that you get from people who find themselves in the incredibly unfortunate situation of having to access temporary accommodation, having been made statutorily homeless. And we know that 60% of those who need temporary accommodation do so because of the end of a private rented sector tenancy. And they are often those who face significant vulnerability, who absolutely need access to accommodation. But the experience for anybody, quite frankly, having to turn up to a bed and breakfast and be in a bed and breakfast for an extended period of time is not something that we should wish for anybody. It does mean that we have to look at alternative ways of bringing forward temporary accommodation. And you will have already seen the temporary accommodation acquisition strategy that is going out and purchasing new homes. That is one of a series of solutions. Any future decision on those temporary accommodation modular blocks will, of course, be subject to a further decision. But this certainly gives us options that we can explore and efficiencies that we can gain. So on that basis, I'd direct Cabinet to the recommendations in the report, including those delegations 1.1 through 1.4, and are they agreed? Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the Cabinet meeting. I thank Cabinet, opposition and officers for their patience. It was a significant meeting with significant public interest. So I thank everybody for their perseverance throughout. And with that, the date of the next meeting will be the 13th of October. And we hopefully, Councillor Stafford, will see you then too.